welcome everyone. My name is Helen Allen. I'm the Executive Director of the Winter Show. We'd love to welcome you all, and we'd love to thank the Sir John Soane Foundation as well as the Hispanic Society Museum and Library for joining us today. I find it somewhat kind of ironic and wonderful that our last time together was actually in the halls of the Park Avenue Armory. Ms. Seldorf was one of our design chairs in 2020, and the Hispanic Society Museum and Library was actually our lone exhibition. So it's really only fitting that we ended right before the pandemic with you, and now we're coming out of it, hopefully, with you again. So I'd like to give a hearty welcome. I just wanted to also share, the Winter Show is America's longest running art, antiques, and design fair. We were established in the 1950s by members of the Board of East Side House Settlement, not-for-profit organization based in the South Bronx. The organization helps transform the lives of our community each and every day, and your support in coming to the show helps really help those most in need. So we would like to thank you for joining us on that front as well. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jonathan Hogg, who's the programming director of the member of the board, but programming coordinator of the Sir John Soane Foundation. So thank you all for joining us, and he will introduce our speakers.
Okay. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, everybody at the Winter Show. I have to say, it's amazing how you pulled this off 2 months after being at the Armory for all these years. So kudos to you. I mean, it's a really amazing thing. As Helen said, I am on the board of the Sir John Soane Museum Foundation, but I'm also the head of public programs. What we try to do at this foundation is to establish programs that are in the spirit of John Soane. We're great lovers of the museum and great supporters of the museum. So this is one of our programs after a very busy season so far. But it just so happens I'm also a trustee of the Hispanic Society. And so I'm here to introduce our great visionaries. But I want to share a little anecdote with you in case any of you have been there or have not. We were introduced to it about 15 years ago by Mickey Wolfson, if anybody knows that name. And he took us there, and I'll never forget walking into the door, seeing the Duchess d'Alba on axis with the entry doors, walking into that remarkable space, looking up into the mezzanine, and there were several more Goyas there, Zuberans, Murillos, Velázquez's over there, extraordinary Soroyas over here, and I was hooked. And it became a lifelong passion of mine, and eventually I met Philippe. Philippe, who is the chairman of the board at the Hispanic Society, asked me to join and to become the head of the building committee because we are undergoing a very major renovation and expansion project, as Annabelle Seldorf is our architect along with Meyer Blunder-Bell. And so let me introduce each of our speakers. So Philippe de Montebello, I feel he doesn't need an introduction at all. Of course, director of the Met for 40 years, and shepherded our superstar. Shepherded an extraordinary time in the Met's history, as I'm sure we all know. And here he is, chairman of our board, and truly our great visionary. We have seen seismic changes at the museum since he joined us, and it's really quite remarkable. And here we have Annabelle Seldorf, our brilliant architectural choice here, our great architect. When we were interviewing architects and going through 26 different ones, we narrowed very, very quickly down to Annabelle. And she and Meyer Blunder-Bell together are without compare in terms of a portfolio of museums, restoration, etc. And what we were particularly touched by what she did to the Neue Gallery and the Clark, because she maintained the essence of those historical structures, and you didn't even know what had happened. And yet she made them so brilliant. So we're very happy to be working with Annabelle. And then lastly, our brand new director here at the Hispanic Society is Guillaume Quintz. He was with the Louvre for quite a few years, went to the Kimball Museum, was quite a curator there, and he joined us just about a year ago. And he is quite a visionary along with Philippe and Annabelle. So I pass it over to Philippe, who's going to say a statement about the Hispanic Society in general. Okay, Philippe, all yours.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you to all of you to have come downstairs and listened to us one more time, since exactly 3 years ago we had another conversation. It was a slightly different dramatis personae, but as you said, Jonathan, we were the museum exhibition at the time, which I curated with Peter Marino, and it was quite a thrilling event. I suppose it's best to start as it keeps one question away. Why am I chairman of the board of the Hispanic Society, having been for so long at a rather larger museum, somewhat more visible on Fifth Avenue? And the answer is very simple. I like hyperboles. And I was able to, for many years, to say we were the best of this, the best of that, which in the case of the Metropolitan Museum is not very difficult. It is the best of a great many things. And so is the Hispanic Society. There is no other collection of art and of books, manuscripts, anywhere in the world, under one roof, that encompasses has such a high level of quality the arts of the Iberian Peninsula and its legacy across the world, not only vastly in Latin America, but also in the Philippines. And the Hispanic Society, which I've known forever as a curator, and it was a paper curator in the 1960s at the Met, and always interested in Spanish art. I studied, actually, and one of the few people alive, I think, who studied Velázquez with López Rey in the 60s and with Jonathan Brown in quite a few decades later. But curators, people in the field, do not know the Hispanic Society, and many museums were, of course, borrowing works of art from it. And when in the, I guess it was in 2007 and 8, when we were planning our new Islamic galleries, and I had a big role in that, not only just as director, but Islamic art is one area where I collected, it's one of my passions. We had a great struggle in the Metropolitan because the whole period of Al-Andalus, which includes North Africa, Spain, all the way up to Isabella the Catholic, is an area where the Met was very weak. And we wanted to create at the Met a Moroccan room, and we decided there was no point in doing so. We had too few objects to put in it. Until, of course, I remembered that some of the greatest textiles, some of the greatest ivories, some of the greatest objects from Al-Andalus, which is that period, were the Hispanic Society. And the Hispanic Society at the time was more or less closed, both mentally and physically. You'll hear a little bit about that in a moment. And so we placed a number of these objects on long-term loan at the Met. The clock always ran both ways, and now these objects are returning to us, and, well, the Met's going to have to buy a few. But that's, here it doesn't concern me very much anymore. As I said, in terms of superlative, and you heard Jonathan refer to all of the great artists of the Siglo de Oro, all the way to Sorolla. But when we say El Greco, we don't have one or two El Grecos, we have 7. We have 3 great paintings by Velázquez. The Louvre, your former museum, does not own a single one.
Nor does the Getty.
Nor does the Getty. All right. There's no sense of competitiveness among museums. In terms of 600,000 works of art, as many books and manuscripts, I don't know how many thousand printed before 1700 that are absolutely indispensable sources of information for anybody doing research, and a seemingly inexhaustible collection of decorative arts, from ceramics to metalwork to silver and whatever else. I say inexhaustible because every time I approach our curator for decorators, Mark McQuaid, and said, do we have anything along those lines? It's very rare. She says, yeah, we have a dozen in storage. And there's nothing that we don't have, including the map of the Americas by the nephew Americo Vespucci, and so on and so forth. You don't want to hear numbers today. Too long, this was not done. But that has changed, and changed dramatically with the arrival of the young kids. And Leo, what did you do to change that?
I followed your guidance. Well, thank you so much, Philippe. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you to the Sohn Foundation and the Winter Show for having us today and giving us the opportunity to share the best kept secret of Manhattan, the Hispanic Society, Museum and Library. But I also want to thank New York for welcoming me so warmly since I arrived 1 year ago. It's truly energizing and incredibly appreciated, I can tell you. So I guess this is New York, and thank you for that. It's quite a challenge, even an impossible task, to summarize the history and the collection of the Hispanic Society Museum and Library in 10 minutes only. So thank you, Jonathan, for that. But I'll do my best. If we can go to the next slide, please. Sorry? Can we lower a bit the light?
We can't know the lights without checking on the brightness.
Okay, thank you so much. Otherwise, we just have to come over to the museum on 155th and Broadway and to see it in the flesh. Well, although this institution remains to be discovered and rediscovered by many, it is one of the oldest and most unique museums in New York City. It is the dream, it was a dream, he called it a poem, of one man, Archer Huntington. If we can go to the next slide.
It may be working on the brightness, but I'll be right back.
Thank you.
In the meantime, please continue. And
Sure,
we'll be right
sure.
back.
So it's the most incredible intellectual adventure. It's the most incredible collection adventure too, because it's over 500,000 objects that are there waiting for people to marvel. And it all started, as often in this country, with one individual, one great philanthropist, Archer Huntington. So you have Archer Huntington here on the slide on your right side, standing in his townhouse on Fifth Avenue. Archer was the son of Arabella and Collis Huntington. Collis Huntington was a railroad tycoon. He was one of the founders of the Pacific Railroad and made a gigantic fortune on the West Coast. Archer was not that much interested in the business, but he was very interested in the art, in the culture. And that came from the from his mother, Arabella Huntington, who was a very important collector of Dutch paintings and French furniture. So this is not what Archer decided to collect. He certainly wanted to, start a new collection that would be more personal. But he had no ties whatsoever to the Hispanic world or Spain. It all started because he went to Texas visiting an uncle of his, and he was blown away by the architecture that he saw. It's a Hispanic architecture. Texas used to be part of Mexico, used to be ruled by Spain. And when he was asking around about what is this architecture that doesn't look like the New England architecture that I know, well, people were answering in Spanish, and then he was blown away again. And this is what ignited his curiosity and passion. If we can move to the next slide, please. And he was a very young boy. He was 9 years old, and he would first, next slide.
Next slide.
And he would first travel by reading. He would travel through books, and actually his first collection, and in many ways his main or more personal collection, is the collection of rare books and manuscripts. We have this incredible holding of rare books and manuscripts. Part of it we showed last year at the Grolier Club in a very nice exhibition that I hope you saw. Soon enough, he decided that this collection would not be only for him or for his friends, but that should become a museum and a library. And this is when he started dreaming about this project. Next slide, please. And this dream came true in the upper part of Manhattan, in Washington Heights. Why Washington Heights, you could ask? Well, because developing part of Manhattan, as the townhouses in the Upper East Side were turned down. Well, that part of Manhattan developed quite fast and quite well. It was a very chic thing to live there. Can we go to the next slide? And I show here some of the very nice buildings and architecture that are surrounding the Hispanic Society Museum and Library. The reason it developed so fast and so well is also because 157th was the last stop of the first ever subway line, the number 1, in New York City. This is why it is the number 1, because it's the first one. And Archer was not very interested in the railroad business, but he knew that tracks bring progress, tracks bring development, and real estate. And he bought the land from the Audubon family and decided to build his museum, his dream, his poem, as he would call it. Next slide, please. So to do so, he had his cousin. The Hispanic Society Museum and Library is very much a family story. The cousin was the architect. The mother was the big pusher for Old Masters acquisition. The wife was the sculptor and the terrace, so it was very much a family. We're not family, we're very friendly, but we are not related whatsoever. Not yet. Oh my God, is that a proposal?
I come out here.
Okay. Well, that's a scoop. So he asked his cousin to design a museum, and that's the first sketch of the main court, which is one of the signature spaces of the museum that we are going to reopen at the end of this year. Next slide, please.
It's on its way.
Okay. There we go.
Here we are. So this is the museum as it initially looked. The entrance would be from 156th, and there was a very nice garden and the stairs, and you would visit the Hispanic Society Museum and Library. But you already see another building on the right of the screen. This is, or was, the Numismatic Society, because Archer Huntington was a very smart guy, and he knew that in order to have his museum to blossom and develop, he needed to attract other institutions to join on the terrace. And the best way to attract others to join is to, well, pay everything. And so he gave the land, he paid for the building, and he funded the endowment. And this is why and how the American Academy for Arts and Letters joined the terrace, the Museum of American Indians joined the terrace, the Geographical Society joined the terrace, and so on. Which is why now we have this incredible campus shared by 3 institutions: the Hispanic Society Museum and Library, of course, the American Academy of Arts and Letters, sure, and Boricua College, which is a bilingual Spanish-English college in Upper Manhattan. So, next slide, please. So, and the inside of the building, which actually remained kind of the same, was filled with the masterpieces that Archer Huntington would buy over the time. But we must give the credit of the Old Masters acquisition to the mother, to Arabella Huntington. Archer Huntington was more interested in living artists, and actually this place started and opened as a museum of contemporary art, in a way. But the mother, Arabella, would really say to her son, well, my son, you like contemporary art, this is great, but Old Masters, this is the real thing. So why if I buy you first Velasquez, but you buy a second one? Or why if I give you half of the money for the Duchess of Alba, but you have to match my fund, and you buy the second half of the Duchess of Alba. And this is what happened, and apparently he enjoyed it, because he bought many masterpieces. Next slide, please. So this is seen from the mezzanine, 1 year after the opening, for the exhibition that Archer Huntington organized on Sorolla. Sorolla was not very well known in the US at the time, and this exhibition launched his career. In 1 month, 160,000 New Yorkers came to see the Sorolla exhibition. That was a hit, that was a blast, and yeah, the career of Sorolla was just paved perfectly in the US. And the year after, they decided to extend the museum and to build a new wing. Next slide, please. To host a series of murals by Sorolla depicting the many provinces of the Iberian Peninsula. And this gallery too, we are going to reopen at the end of the year. Next slide, please. And this is how it looks today. That was for the opening dinner. So that was for the history, very quickly. Now the collection. Next slide, please. The collection, as I said, is over 500,000 objects, documenting and celebrating all the aspects of most of the Spanish and Portuguese-speaking cultures, communities, and countries, and so on. It ranges from ancient time to today, and covers a multitude of centuries, techniques, cultures, and mediums. So I cannot comment on everything, but I just want to give you an overview of the wealth of the collection and the variety of the collection, the diversity of the collection. Can we move forward? So Goya, yes, not only we have one iconic Goya, we actually have 5 paintings by Goya, 15 drawings by Goya, and almost all the prints that Goya ever did, including some monotypes, which are unique prints. Next one. Velázquez, yeah, the Louvre doesn't have any, the Getty doesn't have any, the Hispanic Society has 3. And actually only one is on view right now in our current exhibition, so we are probably the only museum on earth with 1 Velázquez in storage and 2 Goyas in storage. So I don't take it as a pride, but still, this is true and it tells a lot. Next slide, please. El Greco, Stephen El Greco indeed, and some of the most iconic, like the Pieta, inspired by Michelangelo himself. Actually, El Greco was competing with Michelangelo at the time, or the fantastic Holy Family, or the iconic Saint Jerome. This is on our current show. Next slide, please. Sculptures, I hope you all saw the fantastic Gilded Figures exhibition that we did in the last fall. It was very, very successful. We have this amazing collection of polychrome sculptures, and art that's been totally overlooked in the past, but not by Huntington. It was very much ahead of its time, and we are grateful for that. Next slide. Photograph. This is not something people associate the Hispanic Society with, but we have 200,000 photographs in the collection, documenting mostly Spain and Latin America in the early 20th century. So this is absolutely amazing, and the interest of Huntington was in the people, in the customs, in the rituals, in the countryside, in the monuments. So most of what those photographs show doesn't exist anymore. So that tells how precious they are, because this is the memory. This is the memory of the part of the world that is just the past, which is totally natural, but it's great that we can keep the track of that. Next, please. The library, already mentioned, those photos are taken from the exhibition that we had at the Goya Club last year. Next slide, please. Jewels. That I didn't know when I joined, that we had over 200 jewels, and not bad jewels. Those 2 very fancy ones are from the 18th century, they're Portuguese jewels. Next slide. Ancient art, as I said, Huntington funded the excavation in southern Spain, so you received very nice mosaics and sculptures from that. Next slide, please. And an incredible collection of Islamic art, as Philippe mentioned, with many pieces coming from the Alhambra, no less. Next, please. A very great collection, too, of Judaica, which is very interesting because there is really this incredible story about the convivencia, the moment in which in Spain the Jews, the Muslims, and the Christians lived not in peace, but still they lived together, and it didn't last, sadly. Next slide, please. Art from Latin America, either colonial or after the independence of Latin American countries. You have here one of our icons by Manuel Chili, El Caspicara, the portrait of a lady by Campeche, an artist from Puerto Rico, and another icon of the museum, El Costeño, by the Mexican painter Arrieta. Next, please. Decorative art, and especially ceramics, with those ceramics that they used to belong to the Pope Paul V. This very modern, like made in Murano yesterday kind of glassware set. This is actually 18th century Spain. And the last one is a fantastic ceramic from Puebla, in which you can see the Asian influence that is so amazing. Next, please. And it's not only the Iberian Peninsula and Latin America, it's also the Philippines, and it's also Goa. I think Goa is the next slide. No, Goa is not the next slide. The next slide is the terrace. So yes, all this is waiting for you uptown, and to show it all, well, we need to have more gallery spaces. This is why we're doing with Annabelle this incredible renovation, but we didn't want to wait until we're all renovated to sell as a museum, to do our job. So we decided last year to reopen the museum partly, to activate the lower terrace, the Broadway terrace, and you see here an exhibition about the Latinx diaspora in Upper Manhattan. We wanted to start with a community-oriented program and exhibitions, and you have the East Gallery, which is the gallery on the terrace, where we rotate the collection. And I mentioned already gilded figures. Next slide, please. That we had last fall, and currently we have Nuestra Casa, which is, next slide please, which is an exhibition of our many treasures. It's a selection of masterpieces, very well-known masterpieces, and masterpieces to be discovered too. Next slide please. And I think this is what I wanted to share with you, and I hope I have ignited your appetite and curiosity, and we are waiting for you up there. It's not that far. Thank you.
I think one of the truly wonderful things is that when Guillaume arrived, he said, waiting? I don't have time to wait. His energy, his enthusiasm are igniting for everyone. And we had started thinking about how do we renovate this incredible building, make it accessible for people. Accessible, 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 because it's far from accessible now. And when Guillaume arrived, he just said, we'll just do it. And he is. He's doing it. He's opened the lower gallery. He's done all of these incredible things that are unbelievably motivating. Nevertheless, there's work to do, and that'll take some time. So while we're not waiting, we're thinking about how we want step by step can implement modifications, changes that make the museum be a much better neighbor in its own neighborhood, but also truly available for everybody. So what you see here, of course, is 155th Street, or rather in between 155th and 156th Street, where you enter Audubon Terrace. What an incredible place that is. It is like no other in New York City. And for me, naturally, it is the incredible collection, but it's also the series of buildings that surround these wonderful public terrace. That too will need a little bit of work, but it's absolutely beautiful and like nothing else in New York City. So discovering this place, knowing that it is at once an intimate square surrounded by beautiful Beaux-Arts buildings, we realize that that in itself makes part of what makes the Hispanic Society so very, very special. Next slide, please. And here you see the many steps that go down to the terrace. There's the north building on the right-hand side, and am I getting that right? Yes. And next slide. And just very quickly, an overview of how the buildings are organized around Audubon Terrace. On 105th Street, the main building is that of which you saw the photo before, which is the earliest building. The East Building at one time was the Museum of the American Indian and is now part of the Hispanic Society. And in between is what's called the reading room today, where there are And then all the way over on the west side is the McKinley and White building that houses the American Academy of Arts and Letters that I am proud to be a member of. But in a sense, the main building and the north building form a courtyard that really is very much part of the identity of the Hispanic Society, and Baruchia College, that is the kind of partner building to the east building, makes a very beautiful gate. Baruchia College has not taken care of its building all that well, but there's always hope. There's always a notion that maybe one day they'll become enthusiastic and raise the funds to make teaching part of this incredible square. So next, one of the first tasks was to look at what we have. And in between these buildings that you see here, in all these different colors, we looked at how activities were distributed in the building. This was in 2019. Everything was everywhere. Somebody in my office called it a kaleidoscope of activities. And part of the analysis was really to understand, do we have enough room to do what we need to do? In terms of square footage, yes, we do. We have plenty of room. It's just got to be all reorganized and rethought so that activities are much more clear and much more understandable, and that we can celebrate the original and wonderful spaces. And next. One of the things, of course, that Charles Huntington, who I'm not sure that he really was an architect.
Well, probably was not. That's good as you.
No, but if he was an architect, there were certain things, certain sort of key issues that should take place in a museum that he didn't very much think about. And one of them was, how do you get a lot of people into the galleries? And so today you have to climb multiple stairs to get up onto the entrance level of the main building. And once you are at the doorstep of the main building, you have to climb another set of stairs. And then once inside, there's not very much room for a lot of people. So the first thing that we had to begin thinking about is, like, how do we resituate the entrance in such a way that everybody can get there, whether you're in a wheelchair, whether you need assistance, or whether you can climb stairs. So to that end, we're thinking about a ramp that goes down into the terrace, and we're hard at work with the East Building, where on top of the building is going to be a conservation center, and a variety of activities, special exhibitions, etc. will be following suit, and will be creating much better connections all the way across the west. Eventually, rethinking the library reading room. In so doing, what we'll achieve, which I know sounds very boring, but I think is vital to accessing the building and truly enjoying it as one, is we'll be able to create levels that are available for everybody, so that you can reach the main court with its mezzanine level, and really appreciate eventually going all the way over to the Soraya building. My goal is that when we're done with all this work, which is going to be a little while from now, that nobody will remember how it could have been any other way. We'll be building on the exquisite details, beautifully proportioned rooms, but we won't be uncritical. We'll be fixing the lighting, we'll be making the stairs better, we'll rethink surfaces, always in collaboration with Guillaume, Philippe, and the fantastic team at the Hispanic Society.
inspiring and giving valuable specifics on what are some of our generalities sometimes. And we're thrilled to have Annabelle and her imagination and her ability to rethink everything under the general guidance of our director. I'm merely the chairman, and my biggest task is to try not to play director. I wanted to add a couple of things before I turn it over to you, because this is a fairly substantial audience. In fact, there are 3 or 4 empty seats only, and so I'd like to hear questions from you. But I want to add one thing, because it's connected in one way to the Metropolitan Museum and Arabella Huntington. You mentioned that Arabella Huntington was really one of the great collectors of the turn of the century. But what is interesting is that along with the Museum of Modern Art, which was founded by 3 women, one can say that the Hispanic Society owes its existence to Arabella Huntington. And you mentioned that she had a substantial collection of Dutch art, and you might be interested to know that the Aristotle contemplating the bust of Homer by Rembrandt was owned by Arabella Huntington before she sold it to, what was the name of that family in PR? We were neighbors of theirs a long time ago. Anyway, I don't remember names. And eventually at the Met. But I really want to answer some of your questions. I have thousands to ask, but I'm an insider. So we'd like to hear a little bit from the outside. And can a mic be circulated?
Yes.
So
Yes, actually,
some of
apologies
us,
for that. We've
not
got the
them.
microphone ready, so are there any questions in the audience?
Curious, Columbia University is pretty close. Does Columbia University have anything to do at all with the museum?
We have common fellowship with Columbia and also with City College, which is close by too. So we're working together. Actually, if you go to the website of Columbia University, you will see a virtual visit of the main court and the Soria Gallery. They digitized the volumes and the spaces, and that's quite an interesting virtual experience to have. So we're receiving fellows, interns, we're working with them, but no collaboration about exhibitions, for instance. But we just hire a new head of education and an academic program, and that's very much on her desk.
I think it's a very pertinent question. I think at some point the libraries of the 2 institutions should begin talking to each other a little more closely.
Question regarding musical events. Are there musical events? And is there a theater for that?
So yes, we have many musical events. We have a concert series that is very successful this year. It will be about flamenco. Last year it was Baroque music. We also have an incredible collection of Latin American jazz records. No one knows about that, but we're doing a program with Jazz Harlem later this year. And sorry, the last part of your question.
No, how do you advertise that?
Well, it's on our website, and we send press releases to the press on a very regular basis. And if you become a member, you will receive an email in your mailbox, and you know everything.
Is there a new space for the theater?
So we usually use the Soria Gallery or the main court as a space for those performances. But we are very friendly with our neighbor of the American Academy, and they have a fantastic grand auditorium that we are welcome to use. And or their library, we did a concert last year in their library. So
Will it be similar to the Frick Theater that you're creating?
we are not creating any theater, but the theater that the American Academy has is one of the most beautiful, one of the best acoustic in New York City.
It's a room by Cass Gilbert, and it is really spectacular. The acoustics in that room are so good that many musicians do their recordings there, except the subway rooms. But
The subway and
This is a question for Mrs. Holdorf. Are there landmark restrictions which inhibit or prohibit extension into the street? And for example, the gate, as it were, is there a talk of modifying or even taking it out so that it actually opens into?
Very good question.
Yeah.
Yes, the building is very much landmarked, and the Landmarks Commission is incredibly supportive of what we are doing in order to bring the institution back to its full glory. We won't have problems removing the gates. Now, like, I knew it yesterday, but today I don't remember. I think it's the second gate that is much older. The first, the gate on the Broadway is actually from 1971 or something like that. And
Yes, only the main gate up the stairs is landmark, and the gate on Broadway is not landmark, so could be removed. It was put there by Boricua College out of security measures, but we are speaking with them and we'd like to remove it at some point. And so the first terrace will feel more part of the public space and more part of New York City. So yes, and for the accessibility, it's quite critical that we can remove the fence.
In reprogramming what you kind of described as an organized mess and thinking about spatial planning, are you prioritizing accessibility to all of the exhibit spaces, or is it more
Yes.
universal design? Of
the
what
good thing is I can just say yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Any more questions from the audience?
Are there environmental concerns about the building which are going to get addressed?
Yes, of course. There's energy considerations. Relamping everything is very much a part of it. Rewiring HVAC systems, all of that. Bringing this up not only to standard but to the highest and most sustainable standard is naturally part of it, and I should have mentioned that earlier.
Yes, is there a timetable or timeline for when, as the work progresses, how long it will take?
Yes, there is a timeline. Obviously, it's a tentative timeline for part of it because it depends on fundraising, so you can make it faster. But the idea is that we will be reopening new spaces every year. So the Soria Gallery, which is already renovated, will be fully accessible at the end of this year or early 2023. Same thing with the main court, and then we will focus on the East building with the conservation lab on the top floor, so we hope to see that in some point in 2023, 2024, and then an exhibition gallery, education center, and lobby, and all that. So this is the big phase that we want to complete by, let's say, 2025, 2026.
I know that you had a wonderful showing at the Prado Museum several years ago, and I wondered if there's any formal relationship between the two museums. My second question has to do with special exhibitions. What kind of plans do you have for space for special shows?
So, well, the Prado and the Hispanic Society, it's family. So there is no need of a formal partnership or anything like that. But actually, we do have a formal link to the Prado. This is you, because you're an international trustee of the Museo del Prado. So yes and no. But we are working very well together, and not only with the Prado, with many museums in Spain and in Latin America and in the Philippines. As for exhibition, the plan is to have exhibition galleries on the second floor of the East building that will connect through the current reading room to the main court. So people will come to visit an exhibitions and then will be invited to discover and rediscover the permanent collections. And as I understand that you liked the exhibition that we did at the Prado in 2017, I'm happy to report that the collections is still touring. It's going to go to Canada, to Toronto in the spring, then to London, and likely to another venue in Europe. So if you're looking for travels, come to us.
Hi. I'm on the board at Old Westbury Gardens in Long Island,
far away from the heart, pulsing of the Arts Center of New York. I wonder, we found that exhibitions help bring people, draw people in. But with the extraordinary core collection that you have, how will you, investing all this money, how will you measure your success going forward? And how will you get more people to come to see that extraordinary core collection?
I think one of the keys is to make the collection dynamic by doing exhibitions, rotating the collection, addressing the collection, through different angles and all this, to partner with other institutions in New York City, in the US, abroad, to continue touring the collection, because even the day we will be fully renovated, we won't have the space to show 500,000 objects. And for instance, we have 243 Soroyas. I mean, who wants to see 243 Soroyas? I mean, perhaps once in a lifetime. But I think what we are in Washington Heights is very much the headquarter or the mothership of a bigger institution that could be present in many parts of that country and could help other museums complementing their collection to reach out to Spanish-speaking audience. It's perhaps because I started my career at the Louvre, which is a national museum and always thinks of its national reach, that I think the Hispanic Society can play a similar role for Hispanic heritage and creativity in this country. So that would be one of the ways.
Yeah, I think what Guillaume says is very true, and the question is a very good one. There's also, in addition to exhibitions, a program of loans. We cannot open our mail daily without finding institutions around the world wanting to borrow a Velázquez, an El Greco, a Sorolla, viceregal pictures, sculpture. So we are continually lending works of art. We are insisting that the labels include, in order to give us greater visibility, information about not just the picture, name, rank, and serial number, but also where it comes from and what is the Hispanic Society. And as Guillaume has said, the versions of the Tesoros exhibition that was on Via del Prado are traveling, and we're working that out. We are also co-curating exhibitions with other institutions. We have, in addition to the hardware of the works of art, we have an extremely capable and expert curatorial staff and education department, and through a lot of our publications and lectures around the world and colloquia and collaboration, we are increasingly, for anyone interested in the not negligible nature of Spanish and Latin American art, beginning to play a more and more important role, since there is no ensemble of works of art, books, manuscripts that begins to equal ours. Nothing remotely like it.
And a good way to measure success is to have your galleries crowded with people whose eyes are sparkling. And we do that through education a lot and exhibition. So.
Thank you. We've got time for 2 more questions. So we have any other questions from the audience?
Maybe I will ask one of Annabelle. We know your work at the Neue Gallery and how you approach that building. We know your work at the Clark. Could you describe how this differs or is similar to, establishing a museum that is up to date and today, and also recognizes the history of the past?
Yeah, here I go in my life, being known as somebody who just fixes old buildings. Damn, that wasn't the plan. But that is the plan here. We want to be sure that this building shines with every bit of authenticity. And so there are a great many similarities to what we did at the Neue Galerie, what we did at the Clark, and certainly what we're doing at the Frick. Each of these buildings are of varying architectural quality, but they mean a lot to a lot of people. The Clark is arguably a so-so building, but there was so much passion from the founders in that building, and so much affection that the visitors would bring to it, that it felt very worthwhile making it as good as it could be. And to most people, the Clark, the museum building, which we call the 1955 building, reads as if it was always that way. It's very, very different in actual fact. But we worked with the curators, we thought about circulation, we thought about the experience, and there wasn't much of a point in sort of foisting another personality on top of all of that. And that's likely going to be the case here. I don't mind. I think if something is better, then it's just plain better, and if you can make it that, then that's a worthwhile activity. It's not at all self-effacing or denying myself the satisfaction of thinking about surfaces, details, so on and so forth. I think it's the infrastructure of this building that needs so much intervention. And I'm very, very glad to be working with Richard Southwick from Bayard Linder Bell, who is just an expert preservationist, but also has very deep knowledge and experience with these kinds of projects. So, yeah, I think of this as a repair. Maybe it's not repair. It's going to be better than it's ever been. Because it will be something that it never was. It was never accessible to everybody. And I think it is the Hispanic Society's outlook on the community that makes this, that is going to make this very, very different. And I think it's not what it looks like. I think it's all about what it does.
I think the self-effacing, the admirable self-effacing quality of your remarks hide the fact that, in fact, what Annabelle Selbos is going to be doing is far more difficult than a grand, quick sketch of a magnificent building for Architectural Digest photography. The intricacies of the movement within, the refurbishment of galleries to giving it a whole different sense is, I mean, if I were an architect, I would go the other way. So what you're doing is not only incredibly useful, but incredibly difficult.
Fantastic. We've got one last question.
You said at the beginning that there was another building that belonged to another university called this.
It's Baruchia College. It's across from the
Boricua, that means Puerto Rican.
So you said it wasn't in good shape.
It's in original.
So it's close to the museum, is that correct?
It flanks the terrace.
So in other words, are you going to renovate that?
I would have to wait for somebody to ask me to do that. I mean, I'm known to take action, but
I mean, I just thought that since it's close by, why not?
I think I would welcome if you propose that.
Come on, Maria. Come on.
So long as it happens once we're done. I know that that was the last question. I opportunity to do this morning, this afternoon. And I just want to say that when we were talking about the long-range plans and how it was tied to a capital campaign and so forth, that I saw some forlorn looks upon some of you. On the way out, there's a whole list of galleries that are still available. Huge spaces that could bear your name in perpetuity. So, don't be shy.